Great. Well, welcome everybody. Delighted to have you here. My name is Jonathan Gustin, and I am the founder and lead teacher of Purpose Guides Institute. I'm also the host of this book club. Purpose Guides Institute, really, we try to help people to discover their soul level purpose and to embody it in the world as a demonstration of love, as a gift to life. I am delighted to have this as our third book club. One of the things we do at PGI is we invite authors to share their wisdom, their understanding, the way they meet this whole area of spirituality around soul and purpose. So I'm delighted to say hello and welcome to Adyashanti. Hello, Adya. Oh, but you are muted, so let me see. Oh, now you're unmuted. Good.
I'm
Welcome.
unmuted. Okay.
You're unmuted.
Wonderful. Nice to be here with you, Jonathan. Been
Oh,
looking forward to this.
oh, me too. Well, for those of you who are brand new to Adya's teachings, Adyashanti is a spiritual teacher who's devoted to serving the awakening of all beings. His teachings are an open invitation to stop, to inquire, and to recognize what is true and what is liberating at the core of our existence. His books include Emptiness Dancing and Falling into Grace. Adya was asked to teach in 1996 by his Zen teacher of 14 years. A couple years later, I think 98 or 99, I met Adyashanti and quickly became a student. And flash forward just a year and a half ago, I was with Adya and I made an ask. It was a long pass, and I said, would you consider writing an essay on the subject of purpose discovery and do a book club with us? And much to my utter delight and somewhat to my surprise, because he gets way more invitations than he can possibly say yes to, he said, yeah, let's do it. So a year and a half later, he's written the essay, and this is the preview call for the book club, which starts in 2 weeks. I'll describe it at the end of the meeting, but basically we'll be meeting for 2 hours, 2 weeks in a row at this time on Thursdays to study together, that craft of studying and engaging in material as a community. So I'm really excited to be doing that with Adya. So this is a way to dip your toe into Adya's work, his essay on soul and purpose. And hopefully through this interview, I'm going to be asking him a lot of questions. I think he's going to intend to keep them sort of short so I can get a lot of questions out, but we'll see what happens. That's the hope, because I've got a lot of material that I want to cover today to help you feel into whether it's the right thing for you to join this community of book club readers. So with that said, Adya, I want to just get right down to it and start passing the questions to you.
All right, Jonathan, let's dive into it.
So soul, the title of your essay is, soul and purpose. So what does that word mean to you? Where do you hold it? What is soul, and what does soul level purpose mean?
Oh, okay. So admittedly, soul's not an easy thing to define, but I'll give it a shot here, because soul is like one of those things that we experience, right? And it's an experience of being. I see soul as sort of I call it kind of a virtual entity. I don't see it as a thing necessarily, or of any kind, but it's a function, you might say. It's that function, or that sort of psychic entity that that communicates our depth, let's call that maybe our true nature, our fundamental nature, to our conscious mind. It's that which gives us access. Soul can speak to us sometimes in words, often in images, most commonly in certain kind of intuitive feelings, especially when it comes to alignment or misalignment, or feeling that you have the right choice of words or the wrong choice. So there's a feeling sense. And finally, just to make it short, and I think that when we're in connection with soul, we have the experience of meaning, right? So when we have a soulful connection, one of the most profound indicators that we have a sort of connection with soul or with the soul function is at that moment life feels kind of aligned and with meaning, right? Maybe often not a meaning that we can articulate necessarily, but an experience of meaning. So maybe that's a good place to start with soul as a
Yeah, that's a
definition.
great place. So could you disambiguate, like parse the difference between spirit and soul? Because you made a comment that it's sort of like a bridge between
Yeah,
uh, something, the unbounded maybe, and
yeah.
ego. Could you say a little more between the differences, how that works? Where you have ego, soul, and spirit, or whatever you want to
Sure.
call it.
Well, we'll start with, I think, what everybody that's listening, we all can know what ego is, right? We have, as an experience, we kind of have some intuitive sense of what ego is, and it's often the image also that we carry about in our minds, in our bodies, how we feel about ourselves, think about ourselves, you know, on and on and on. So I don't need to have a long description of the ego, I think. In the way that I use spirit, because it's an important thing when any of these concepts, right? We don't all use them in the same way. So the way I use spirit is very similar to the way I would use our true nature, sort of like our fundamental nature when we kind of wake up from our identity as an ego, right? Um, as sort of this sort of, well, a virtual kind of entity. It doesn't feel like a virtual entity when we're um, identified with it. But then we experience ourselves to be something closer or close to what the word spirit is trying to indicate, right? It's not something solid, not something e- easily described or super tangible, but it's sometimes people have called it something like consciousness. That's one way of thinking about it. But and then the soul. So our true nature, for I think for for most people, their deeper, what I'm calling true nature, is sort of, it's below the level of their conscious recognition. That's why we spend so much time identified with the ego. A lot of spiritual practice is a way of trying to breach the barrier between the conscious and the unconscious, so that we actually become conscious of ourself as spirit, as ourself as true nature, right? So when we have a deep spiritual awakening, we've breached the barrier between the conscious and unconscious, but not just the unconscious, but that sort of unifying aspect of the unconscious that we could call a true nature. Perhaps we could call that spirit, at least in this moment, right? Because sometimes I'll use it in different ways. Soul is that which is it's communicating between these two, our conscious and our unconscious, between our true nature and the empirical ego, or simply our conscious mind. So it's communicating between those two. It's also translating, because true nature doesn't necessarily speak to us often in words necessarily. So sometimes the soul will come to us with communication of feeling, change of perception, images. Sometimes the soul speaks in dreams, often stories, right? And I think the great, say, religious stories are stories that are literally meant to evoke some sense of deep connectedness, right? So the soul is what like connects us from to our conscious and what we're usually unconscious of.
Beautiful. Um, well, so that makes me want to ask this question about relationships, because sometimes when I'm on the proverbial meditation cushion, it
Mm-hmm.
feels like there is nobody and nothing to relate to. And
Yeah.
furthermore, if the whole universe disappeared, something would be okay with that. And yet at the level of soul, I experience it very differently. Like there's this
Mm-hmm.
desire to love in action. So maybe you could
Mm-hmm.
speak a little bit about that sense of connectedness, and maybe the sense of becoming or wanting to
Yeah.
love in a demonstrable way.
Yeah. Well, here's a way I like to talk about it. I hope it makes sense. You could also think of soul as a kind of, it's the humanization of our true nature, right? It's the humanization of ourself as pure spirit. Or, like you said, you can go on the meditation cushion, you can have your sense of separate self drop away, or really anything else can drop away. And there's just this sort of pristine, utter stillness or emptiness. Um, and and maybe we even kind of have a shift of identity where we feel like that's what I am, as intangible and ingraspable as it is, that's actually what I am. And so in a certain sense, at that moment, we've bumped into what words like eternity are trying to remind us of, right? Timelessness. um, and yet the soul is kind of it's like I said, it's this virtual entity. It's this, and I think one of the functions it has to do is it humanizes in a certain sense. Um, it is it humanizes our essential, the very, very ground of our being, because the ground of our being feels very non-human, right? It's totally transcendent of the world of time and space. It's not really concerned with what happens here in time and space. It might even see it in some senses as an illusion, like these are all experiences that we can have. Um, but the soul kind of, it connects, the ground of being to our more, like what we're generally think of our conscious human self, right? And so that's when it turns these deep insights, they start to take on a different quality as they kind of become humanized, or actually our realization, say, broadens and deepens, that it becomes more paradoxical, right? we are we are nothing and no one, and we appear as someone and somebody. The world may, from one point of view, and especially in deep insight, may seem to all of a sudden not be that important. But also when that really grows, if we don't fixate on a realization like that and that matures, then the world starts to look different. The world takes on a kind of incredible value. And this is where it's hard to talk about, because how do you talk about a lived experience, a lived perception, where you have almost unlimited value and also a kind of profound detachment happening at the same time? How do you have an extraordinary open-hearted love and concern for the world, for others, for life, and at the same time be vitally connected to a sense of everything's absolutely fundamentally well. Everything is absolutely well, as this kind of profound detachment and serenity. So what I found is the deeper the truth we come, the more paradoxical it becomes. And soul is right there, and that which can contain paradox, right? Where our minds have a hard time containing paradox, like the soul function, it is a paradox, right? It's a living paradox. It's eternity and this very time-bound existence all rolled into one. And that's why it gives rise to compassion and love and, altruism and all these kinds of experiences.
At the beginning of that answer, you talked about the humanization of true
Mhm.
nature, and that really struck me because um, some time ago I would have thought, uh, waking to and embodying true nature was in some ways kind of leaving the human behind. There was a
Mhm.
transcending of that. And yet,
Sure.
if I was to speak in a hierarchical way, I would say actually that would be one step, and then here's the next step, and tell me if you think if this is what you're saying, if this is what is true, is that actually true nature is beautiful, the primordial ground of being, but when it is paradoxically inextricable with our humanness, it's actually, could you say it's the ground of being is more, or is that just a moronic thing to say?
More in what sense?
Well, if the ground of being doesn't need or require a human, but when it
Right.
experiences itself it, through it, it has that
Yes.
humanization touch, then it seems
Yes.
like it's almost ground of being plus.
Yes, I would agree. Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, Jonathan, I wouldn't say this as, I wouldn't want anybody to take this too concretely, but it points to something that I think is important, is the ground of being, right? The ground of being in a certain sense is using human consciousness to become aware of itself, to become self-conscious, right? Because the ground of being is a completely undifferentiated state of being. When someone dips in there in deep insight, or maybe a little bit in sort of some deep meditative experience, and they're really suffused in it. They're in an undifferentiated state of being, which is a pretty non-functional, actually, state of being, right? Because nothing's differentiating, nothing's deciding that one thing's more important than the other, you know? Um, and so in one sense, there's no real orientation. Of course, that's part of the freedom of it, right? There's no boundary, there's no discrimination, there's no differentiation. It's just endless expanse of the ground, of the source of being, right? And yet, um, I think part of the spiritual instinct, that arising, that yearning for God or awakening, or however that arises in somebody, it's coming from the ground of being, right? That's where it's coming from. That's where its roots are. And so in that sense, it doesn't just come up haphazardly, right? Every single human being has this happen. So we can go into an experience where the ground of being needs nothing, absolutely nothing, wants nothing, needs nothing, going nowhere, doing nothing. But that's the problem with both our description of things and even our experiences, because our experiences are very rarely all encompassing, even if they feel like they are, right? So this right here, right? You and I, the human flesh and bones and all this, this is the ground of being too. Because we will speak like everything's all one, everything's all one, and then in the next sentence you'll hear someone dismissing part of existence. Say, it's not that though. Well, how does that equate with all one? You know, so if it's all one really, then the one can appear as total transcendence, and it is, and it can appear as total eminence, this manifest existence. It can appear as silly, strange little human beings talking to one another. It can appear as at the nothingness or the pure potentiality of all existence. And it's all of that at once, simultaneously. We, in our own spiritual journeys, we go to certain parts of that, right? We transcend the ego, and then we discover the kind of ground of being and its groundness, and then we go to something else, and the vision fills out as our experience and our realization gets more mature, unless we make the mistake that's very common, that we say in our minds, this is it. This insight is absolutely final. There is nothing more to it. And then there's a good likelihood that we won't see anything more. It'll close it off.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. So I want to not play devil's advocate, but allow what shall we call it? The non-dual fundamentalist of me. It's a side. It's there.
Yes.
So we're gonna let it out for a moment. So that part says, you know, only ego needs a purpose. That's
Mm-hmm.
not non-dual. Only ego needs a purpose. Life is an illusion. There's no purpose other than to wake up. And upon awakening up, it's like a booby prize. It's the runner-up prize or
Mm-hmm.
something. It's the silver. So I'm wondering how you meet that question with the word purpose.
Well, there's a quote that I really like that relates to this. It's not directly related to purpose. We'll bring it around to that real quickly. It's by Ramana Maharshi, where he said, "The world is an illusion if seen apart from the self." Or Brahman. If seen apart from God, the world is an illusion. But if seen as the self or as the divine, then it's completely real.
Hmm.
that's the paradoxical realization, right? That's not just getting stuck with the world as an illusion. It's an illusion if you see it as a separate thing. If you see it as the face of God, well, then it's no longer an illusion, isn't it? You see? And so, like I said, the difficulty with this is we do, hopefully, we can have these deep awakening experiences where we don't feel the kind of ego grasping and looking for purpose and meaning, right? We seem to be, that's part of the relief of it. Like, oh, I don't have to become something. I don't have to accomplish anything to feel totally satisfied, free, and to feel like life is rich and beautiful. And yet, to do anything, walk across the room, pick up a glass of water, go to work, come home, all those are value decisions. Maybe they're no longer being made by the illusion of an ego, but they're still being made, right? They're being made maybe by the totality of life. But something's deciding to walk across the floor and go out that door is more important than anything else I could be doing right that moment, because if there is anything more important, that's what you'd be doing. So value judgments are happening. Most of them are unconscious, right? All the time. It's unless you're unless you're sound asleep, these are happening, right? And what I've noticed, not only in my experience, but I've just, when I look at what I consider like some of the most spiritually awakened beings in history, you look at their lives, they're very purposeful lives. They very definitely had a direction. They weren't just sitting there kind of going like, I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. Nothing matters. Doesn't matter. Everything's God, so whatever. Anything goes. That's not what they're doing. They have very obvious sort of direction. They have intention. We could call that purpose, right? And they're not just sitting there not knowing what to do because all of it's an illusion, right? They may have experienced that perspective, but that's not where they end up being stuck in, right? Jesus had a very purposeful, right? Almost like a life full of destiny, right? The Buddha had a very purposeful, the rest of his life after his awakening, right? So the difference is these aren't purpose and meaning. They can operate from a different level of being than just the ego, right? Which is often trying to sort of fill in the gaps, make itself feel better, and all sorts of things which is relevant. Like if that's where our identity is, fine, then we want to do whatever makes that was coherent and rich a life as we can have. But even in our spirit, when we're functioning from a completely different order of being, meaning and purpose don't necessarily look conventional necessarily. And yet I would suggest that if we're mature in our realization, at some point an orientation comes to us, right? A direction. And it's often something that's very unambiguous, very, very clear. And so I think it can still operate even without a sort of tight ego identity functioning. And it does operate. And we see it all the time. And
It's
if it doesn't, that's a kind of spiritual disease. In Zen, we call it stuck in emptiness. And it's common, right? Because it's a nice place to get stuck, man. Nothing matters. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to become anybody. I don't have to earn my sense of well-being. Like, that's really great stuff. And we should really experience that because it's very freeing and very liberating. But if we fixate there, it becomes a sticking point. And then it's kind of like, it's like catching the flu or something. It's a kind of spiritual disease. It's quite common too.
Let me say that back to make sure I'm understanding that personal drive, egoic drive, can begin to dry out
Mm,
in the process of awakening.
it
And
does.
briefly, it's possible that soul drive isn't even noticed for some time, and one is
Right.
just perfectly happy to just, you know, just be. But what
Sit on a
I'm
park bench forever.
forever, yeah.
Yeah.
And then what I'm hearing you say is that at some point on that park bench, there's a high likelihood that drive will continue or maybe modulate in a way that's not coming from ego, but that's
Yeah.
coming from true nature via soul.
Directly from true nature via soul. Absolutely. Yeah. And the difference as a as an experience of being, we might say, is when it's coming from true nature, it's not a search to fill up any sense of lack, right? Nor is it sort of an anxious attempt to save the whole world from collapsing, right? It's not anxiety driven. It's not, um, driven by trying to fill something up. It's sort of the wholeness of being just forming a direction, an orientation. And that's the beautiful thing about it is it's not an attempt to fill something up. But if we don't step up to it, right, if we don't respond when the calling comes, if we kind of go like, wow, it's really nice to just be sitting on this park bench forever, because nothing's demanded of me and I've got my bliss, and well, hope everybody catches up someday. It's a comfortable place to be. And often there's egoic elements operating in a completely unconscious way. And those elements will be the part that will hold on to it. The soulful function is when all of a sudden it's the soulful function starts to come online. And all of a sudden it's like, well, no, this life doesn't necessarily belong to me. This is a life of this is a different kind of life. This is a life of totality, you might say, even though I know that might be abstract. Um, but you start to discover, I think before you even get to things that conventionally look like meaning or purpose, let's say, I think the first thing that you start to discover, certainly I discovered, was that true nature, I call them soul values. That true nature values certain things in life. And that's what begins to really give it directions, right? True nature just happens to value um, things like truth and love and honesty and, well, sometimes courage, because it's not always easy to follow through on the dictates of the soul. Um, Clarity, love. There are other things, but these aren't just nice feelings. These are literally elements of life that true nature values, and those start to orient your direction from literally from moment to moment to moment, right? Because if we actually take it seriously, if we really take it seriously, what does it mean to be oriented? Say my two soul values, as you know, have always been for a long time, truth and love. And those sound quite lofty and abstract. But in a human sense, they come down to something like integrity, honesty, openness, because I might see something some way that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it is in some final sense. So that's a truthfulness also includes openness, you know, acting on, it includes integrity, acting on one's integrity. So, and love, and boy, does that become like really baseline human stuff when you're being challenged, and you'll know, like your body will tell you, am I being in harmony with those values of the soul or in alignment or not? Because as soon as you're not in alignment, you'll feel it. Something won't feel quite right. Or all of a sudden you'll feel a little, sometimes people felt nauseous inside. I used to feel nauseous when I would stray, you might say. So anyway, I don't want to keep going because I know there's a lot to go, but there's a whole way that The soul is communicating to us, and true nature communicates us through the language of the soul. And we're in a culture that's basically illiterate of that language.
We are in a
We're
soul
just
literate.
illiterate. We just haven't learned, like, this is how it's talking to you, sweetheart. You know, sometimes it does it with words, but the other 95%, it's different language. And here, let me help teach you what the language of your soul is. You know, we all really need that. It's really, really important.
Well, a while back, you mentioned that soul often will speak in images or dreams. I thought that was very interesting. I wanted you to pull that out a little bit, because people are like, "What? You know, soul speaks in images? What could that mean?" Could you kind of spread out, point to that a little more?
Sure, I think it's quite common. I imagine most people that are listening to this have had some experiences in their life where, you know, you have a dream and then you remember it, or maybe you wake up from it, and it kind of occurs to you like, oh, like almost intuitively, that dream seemed to have something that it was telling me about some situation of maybe that day, or maybe something that's been long standing, you know. And all of a sudden you realize there's a communication happening here in my unconscious can't get it through into my conscious mind. And so it's operating in the in between realm, right? Because dream is in between being consciously awake and functioning and asleep. So the dream is that nether region, right? It's quite magical, actually. And sometimes the soul will speak to us. It'll try to give us, um, show us things, right? So give you a quick example. When I was a kid, I had a situation, kid situation that was just intimidating, right? Just kids being intimidating. And would have this reoccurring dream night after night, actually, where I would just find myself running, you know, from a monster. And most people have had those kind of dreams, and I'd be terrified. And the faster I ran, the more frightened I got, until some point, right before the monster was going to devour me, I would wake up in a sweat and heart breathing and terrified, and simultaneously a moment later, like really glad that I'd woke up to a different reality. Like, oh, I'm in bed, I'm alone. And then one night, the same things happens. I'm being chased, I'm running, I'm terrified. But then something comes through into my mind. Seemed totally irrational. I think I'll just stop. I'm tired of running. I think I'll just stop and turn around and face the monster. And I want to see what happens when I stop, turn around, and face the monster. So in my dream, I stopped, I turned around, I faced the monster. And as soon as I looked up at this gaping, you know, monster, teeth, just about to devour me, as I looked it straight in the eyes, it just disappeared. Now, that was directly tied to this life experience I was having as a kid, where these other kids were intimidating me and frightening me. And something was trying to communicate, like, there's a different way to be. And I actually did it. The next times the kids were intimidating me, I just sort of turned around and just faced them. And fortunately, doesn't always work out this way, but fortunately, when I just faced them, it just defused it at that moment. I dropped out of the game. I'd taken a different role. So, just an example. I think sometimes our dreams do try to communicate, and it's interesting that they do that, right, through images and stories. Right? Another thing we've forgotten in the modern culture is that the power of stories. You know, that stories can carry wisdom. It's no mistake that all of the great religious traditions have story as their foundation. They all have story, right? Even ones that are very philosophical, like Buddhism, there's very much a story underpinning that. And stories and dreams can communicate things that can't be communicated in just the rational language, right? They're pulling from all these dimensions of the psyche and communicated in so many different languages at the same time. So, yeah. And that's something we would be really wonderful. We learn that too, right? It's
Yeah.
like, what's the story trying to tell you? You know, instead of someone telling you what the story means, like, what does it mean to you? So then it's evoking your own soulful intelligence.
I sometimes think it's not that we discover a purpose, we discover that we're purposed. It's not that we discover a story, we discovered that we're storied.
That's a great way to put it.
But
That's a great way to put it.
Robert Bly had a term, actually, I think he got it from the guy from Lord of the Rings, J.R. Tolkien, mythopoetic, that there's a mythic element in our journey. It's poetic. Bill Plotkin calls it the mythopoetic identity.
Yeah.
And that it's actually much truer than any sort of, everyday personality, ego name or story that we could conjure.
Absolutely. Look, we are all living out a story. Most of the time we don't know what the story is, right? We don't know what it is. So maybe, some of the most, just one of the stories is like the typical spiritual seeker story, right? There's a hero, doesn't feel like a hero at the moment, but dives into the great unknown, goes through a journey, faces lots of challenging things, frightening things, but essentially it's encountering the unknown, scary dimension of life, plunges into the underworld, which is also a symbol for what's underneath your conscious level of knowing, and then comes back, right? Comes back to consciousness, right? To the conscious level, and is transformed by the journey, by the process, and then naturally feels like they have something to share. That's being kind of possessed in a way by a mythic story. You may not know that that's what's happening, but that is what's happening. That's what's happening. And and that's where all of our myths come by, is because we're all living out a story. Even if you think you're not living out a story at all, it behooves each one of us to look and see, what story am I living out?
Yeah.
And does that story actually resonate with my soul? Is it my soul's story, or is it my culture's story, or my parents' story, or my ego's story? Right? So kind of the way that you had to describe that sense of meaning and purpose coming from true nature, you described that in a way just before you asked me the question, which was lovely. I can't quite remember the words that you use, but it is the sense, the living direct experience, that it's not the ego looking for the meaning or looking for the purpose, not at this level of being, but it is almost like meaning and purpose finds you. It catches up. It's because there's something in all these stories where you're being asked to rise up, right? You're being asked to respond to something that you as an ego didn't create. And I think that's the deeper meaning of meaning and purpose, is you are basically saying yes to the journey that life wants to have through your life, through your human incarnation. And
Yeah.
you're saying yes to it. And that's a meaningful feeling life, right? It may not always be an easy life, but it will be full and rich with meaning and purpose.
Beautiful. I wonder if you would connect that to this word, responsibility. I really love this word. You've been speaking about it and watching you on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So you spoke a little bit about what maybe we could call your soul core values,
Mm-hmm.
which is beautiful. But is there a sense, as the narrative or the drive of ego begins to dry out,
Yeah.
and soul purpose comes out, where does responsibility, does soul make us experience our a responsibility to life? Does
Yeah.
the world need us? Are we responsible to something at a very deep level?
Yeah. We're responsible for the whole thing, the entire thing. I mean, if we really get what unity is about, there's no cop out. Like, What's the
Wow.
reason that people are starving in Darfur or somewhere? Well, it's me. It's not just them. It's me. I'm responsible, right? That doesn't mean we have to be overladen with guilt and shame and all that. But let's break this down really quickly, Jonathan, a little bit. As I said, we can come into, especially with some deeper dimensions of realization, every dimension of deep insight has within it a potential illusion. And the deeper your insight goes, the more concealed the potential illusion is. So one of the common potential illusions that we talked about is you can come into states of existence that are so fulfilling just to be, that nothing else is relevant to you at all. And, it's a great place to be. And we can get stuck there because there's a seed of delusion. The delusion goes, well, this feels like it's the whole enchilada, man. This feels like everything I ever wanted. That's no indication that it is the totality. It just means it feels like that. And if you don't watch it, that illusion will take hold and it'll disconnect you from everything. But if we don't fall prey to that, responsibility will find you. And I think that, well, let me just end with this, because I could go on and on, but we wanted to keep this somewhat brief, but I want to make it personal, right? So it's real.
Yes.
Many, many, many years ago, I went through one of the most devastating spiritual times of my whole life, when I thought the whole spiritual project was done and I was a total failure, right? Well, about that time, I had one of these profound grace moments right in the middle of the worst possible defeat I really ever experienced in my life, where just the heart opened. What I now call redemptive love found me, right? It didn't create it. That was certain. It found me. It enveloped me. It was that living sense that every instant of life was suddenly made like in the snap of a finger. It was all, everything was forgiven, everything was fine, everything was just bathed in love and light, and it was just this beautiful, wonderful thing. And right in the middle of it, and mind you, at that time, I'm a very serious, Zen Buddhist practitioner, right? I'm not thinking in theistic terms. And right in the middle of that experience of just being kind of blissed out of my mind, this like booming voice comes, like Charlton Heston, in the Ten Commandments, the old movie. And it said, literally in a booming voice, "This is how I love you, and this is how you shall love all things and all beings everywhere." Now, I know that voice now, I even knew it then, it wasn't coming from a God out there. It was the voice of true nature. But it was such a gift, because it was like, here, you're given a gift beyond your wild imagination, this depth of love. And now you're being challenged. Now you have a responsibility, which is clear as day. This comes with a responsibility. This wasn't just for me to feel good. That was the beginning. This is for me to embody and live to whatever extent I can do it. And that is, as we say in Zen, a koan. It's a life koan. I will live that koan out for the rest of my life. There's no ending to that koan, right? How fully can that revelation be embodied in my humanity? And that's a responsibility. And to not step up of that would feel like, well, it would feel like a violation of the soul. So I don't think we're given insights or any of this just to sit around forever and basking in the glory of it. Do that for a while. Let yourself be healed and just, let it just really, really sink in. But if we don't fixate, there's going to be a direction that arises. And you're going to realize that with this gift comes a profound responsibility. And you may or may not like that. Because it's a real responsibility, right? With real consequences.
It's interesting, and maybe this is the case for most people who stumble on that responsibility. It actually feels good to my ego because I didn't know what was really, truly essential to be responsible to. And then
Right.
when soul revealed something, it's like, well, okay, I will be in service to that. Like it
Yeah.
wants to be a dog following a very good master.
Yeah. And here's your life work now, right? It evolved out of, it sounds like, I mean, I'm sure you were drawn to do this work in a deep way, but it also had an element of stepping up to the responsibility that comes with insight. And it feels good. You're right. It does. It might sound intimidating, and sometimes it can feel that way, right? Because the task is infinitely large. And yet that's another, like, that's the language of the soul, right? When something in you just feels like, yes, yes. It doesn't matter if it's easy. It doesn't matter if it's difficult. It doesn't matter anymore. There's just yes. And that's a language, right? That's how the soul's telling you, man, you're aligned right now. That's it. You're aligned with the way life wants to move in you. You're not at odds with it. You're in the flow. And then things do start to flow, don't they? And doors open up. And but I think that's an important point, because we're usually taught to relate to this in such self-oriented terms that we forget that we can approach this whole notion of meaning, purpose, direction in such a bigger context.
Yeah.
And it feels good. Our soul sings with it.
It's paradoxical because normally we think that I think, well, I want choice. You know, I don't want to be forced into a narrow path. But
Mm.
as it seems to be turning out, what's that line from David White, the poet? To make a promise you cannot break. It's like it's
Yeah,
the responsibility. It's the marriage to something beyond the self that you couldn't get out of if you wanted to, and you wouldn't really want to get out of. I mean, there'll be moments where,
sure. There'll be
but
moments.
mostly it's like it's a promise. It would kill you to
It
break.
would kill you to break. Yes.
Mm.
And I don't want to be frightening people, but and it can and might kill you if you break it.
Mm,
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen it all the time. It can
really?
do it because, you know, this stuff isn't just stuff that's happening in our minds or just in our psyches. We're one whole thing. It's right down there in the body, and it's, you know, it's, you know, people can get sick and die from not listening to their soul and not being aligned. It can have real consequences. On the other hand, the consequences can be beautiful by aligning, saying yes, and really feeling like I want to, right? This is this is beautiful. This makes for a beautiful life.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to use the word alignment. It's not always comfortable. It's certainly not always easy, but it's like a good fit. Like it's you're in alignment.
Mhm.
That much you can say you're experiencing.
I think that's the number one, or the most obvious soul language is alignment and connection. And funny, they always go together. When you feel really connected, you feel aligned. And when you feel really aligned, you feel connected in any way. Like, we're talking big ways, right? But there's also just the human way, where when me and you, Jonathan, right now, right? When we feel aligned in our communication and our conversation and with each other, right? We feel connected. We feel really connected. And our connection helps foster alignment. And that's soul communication stuff. That's the language. But if we don't know the language, we might just discount it. Like, oh, connection. Well, you know, now I'm getting in a little disagreement, and I feel like I want to emotionally disconnect, and your soul will let you know that that's not such a great idea either. You know, you can disagree, but you might not want to disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
feel,
I think alignment and disconnection are the primary the most accessible languages of the soul.
yeah. Yeah, it's always seemed to me that soul it's relational. It's your relationship to other people, to what's that fellow's name? David Abram, the more than human world. Like just
Mm-hmm.
all the elements and facets of life. It's like, where do you belong in that? What's your place in that web of life? I did want to ask a question sort of from the other side. So you have the
Mm-hmm.
non-dual fundamentalist over here, and then let's posit another one. So this question actually came from a colleague of mine the other day. I'm going to say it, but then I'm going to reformulate it.
Okay.
Um, so obviously not the biggest fan of non-duality, this particular friend. He said, why is it that non-dual traditions have completely failed us so far? And might this failure have something to do with a lack of understanding of soul? So I'm going to reformulate it because there's a lot of suppositions in there.
There is.
Yeah, a ton. So um, I'll form it as an evolutionary impulse for wholeness and for more goodness, truth, beauty, to be of service. So I think where the question is coming from is in some versions of classical traditional non-dual teachings, it would at least seem that soul is either completely dismissed or partially sidelined, and that serving the human and more than human realm isn't really the main point. It's to wake up out of, the illusion or whatever we want to call this world. So from that standpoint, if I were like being ornery and difficult, which I think I will try to be, it would be, so that impulse, as the tsunami of climate change is off the shore and partially on the shore and getting closer and closer, there is a lot. I'm not talking about the anxiety, which can be there, and the
Mm-hmm.
sadness, which definitely can be there, but the love. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think where this question comes from is, when we have people waking up, especially in that stuck place you talked about, is it an impactful evolutionary force? The whole tradition of Zen and Advaita Vedanta. In one way, we can say, well, it's not its job. It was never meant to be an activist, impulse. But
Mm-hmm.
from the standpoint of wanting life to flourish, one could conjecture, and I'm curious what you'd say, that actually it's not really, the world's people are meditating, people are waking up, and the world seems to be getting worse in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Sure. Yeah, awakening isn't the answer to everything. That's for sure. It's the answer to some things, not the answer to everything. I think to sort of, the implication is sort of laying that at the feet of non-duality, but of course that's lumping non-duality as if it all means the same thing. It doesn't. Zen non-duality is very different from Advaitic non-duality and the Christian mystical non-duality, and so it goes. So, just to say non-duality actually means nothing. But one has to be much more clear. And usually it's not actually, in most cases, the old traditional forms of non-duality that are so dismissive of things. It's often the more hip, new, sort of cliche interpretations of those old traditions. Like there's a lot of,
Mm.
eating the icing on top of the cake and dismissing the cake, right? Shankara could talk endlessly about how awful and terrible physical existence was in the body and the descriptions of all that, right? But all that was strategic, that was also sort of strategic, because then he could also and he did write lots of poems to the Divine Mother later in his life, right? And that's a very sort of connected thing. He put a very, very, very high importance on people's morality and their virtue. He even said, gosh, until you get your morality and your virtue together, you really shouldn't be having anything to do with this non-dual stuff anyway,
Mm.
because you might end up to be a monster.
Mm.
You might end up to have a real sense of expanded freedom and well-being, but have other dimensions of yourself drastically underdeveloped and lopsided, and this gets very dangerous, you know? So yes, it's not that sort of any form of spirituality is the answer to everything, right? But let us not forget that nothing has been the answer to everything, right? If anything had been the answer, we wouldn't be here with an earth falling apart and with all the existential massive dilemmas that face us, right? So like everybody's in the boat. Like, okay, nothing saved us from where we are. So maybe we are the most well suited by looking with really fresh eyes, because the truth is no generation ever in the history of our humanity faced the kind of issues that we're facing now. The Buddha and Shankara and Jesus and all the rest, they never thought like, gosh, we could destroy this whole place and it could just be a worthless rock pile with us, you know, being dead as a nit as far as everything else. That was never part of the consideration of what was even possible. So we're in a really different place, and I do think it's calling for us to we're always translating our own insights, even our awakenings. They're translated, even if you don't think you're translating them, you're translating them. And I think it's useful to become very conscious of those translations, and because you can't divorce, I think, any authentic spirituality or even spiritual insight. It can't rightly be divorced from the world. It, all the spiritual teachings, the Buddha's teachings, were relevant to his time and place. Doesn't mean they're not relevant now, but they didn't exist in a vacuum. Nobody's insight exists within a vacuum. It's all this, because it's all interconnected, isn't it? So I do think that, yes, if we take the more cliched, you know, versions, the sort of non-dual fundamentalist versions, which is really a conceptual non-duality, right?
Hmm.
Which is actually, to my mind, when I hear it, usually what I hear is not non-duality, but duality doubled down on,
Wow.
extreme duality. The world is not real, and that's what the truth is, and pure consciousness is real. There's nothing non-dual about that. Nothing, right? Unless we see, oh, the world is consciousness. Oh, okay. Wow, now the world has value again.
Hmm.
But maybe not the same anxiety, because worlds come and go, and maybe I can come to peace with that. Like, okay, we're not going to get out of this. You know, it's not going to be here forever. So they do come and go, and the greater reality remains. Okay, but let's not grab hold of that and fixate just to make ourselves feel comfortable. We can, at the same time, we can remember that also, if the world is also consciousness or a manifestation of consciousness or whatever, whether you think it's a dream apparition or whatever it is, it's still of consciousness. It has tremendous value then.
Hmm.
It's the face of God. Right? As Ramana said, you see the world as the self, then the world is real. If you see it apart from it, then you have an illusory idea of the world. Well, if you see, just imagine, Jonathan, if everybody saw the world as the living face of God. I don't know what that world would be like. I don't know how people would behave, but if one saw that, not just believed in it or hoped for it, but saw it, because it is possible to see the world that way. I can tell you that for sure. Um, it changes your whole relationship to the world. It just changes everything. Everything.
Boy, you you met that question so elegantly that it's a story of non-duality, or non-duality light, or neo-Advaitic idea that transcendence and on being the unbounded is a get out of jail free card to any responsibility and to loving life and to acting in service. It was
Yeah.
just beautiful.
But there's something in a human being. We want to get out of jail card. We don't want
Yeah.
to be held accountable. We don't want to be responsible, right? It's comfortable. It's a nice, safe place.
Yeah.
And yet, and this is the hard, and I understand, look, Jonathan, it's not that I don't intend to be overly judgmental about it. I get it, right? I get that that paradox is not an easy thing until we really deeply see it and experience it. I get that. And I know we tend to go from one opposite to the other. I'm an ego and now I'm divine nothingness. And we just go from one to the other. That's just the way our evolution goes. But we also kind of swing back into something else, right? Something that's more whole, that's actually not caught on either sides of the duality, but honors the duality, embraces it, right, without being caught. So it's like the world thing. We can see the world as the face of God, see it as like infinite value, right, and the beings in it, and at the same time, simultaneously, we can be in a living touch with something I just call the gaze of eternity, that's already and always totally okay with everything, with the disillusion of the entire cosmos. It's totally okay. I'm suggesting both of those can live in one single vision. And they help each other because then we can be dedicated to the welfare, right, of things, we can be dedicated to the healing of each other or the planet or whatever we're called to, but without the existential dread and anxiety and terror, right? If we're connected to eternity. So I think they actually work really well together, you know?
Beautiful. The poles, the paradox within one vision. That's thank you.
Yeah,
Well, we're out of time. That
that
went
went
by
quick.
quick.
Yeah.
Fastest hour of my life. Shall we invite folks to your book club? Shall I say a few practical things and then give you the final word to, if you care to, invite
Oh,
people to study your essay and study with you?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll send out an email. It'll have all this information, but I'll give you the 1 minute tour. So in 2 weeks, on at this time on Thursday, it's 6 p.m. to, it'll be 2 hours each, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Thursdays. This is Pacific California time. May 21st and May 28th. Instead of just having me ask questions, this will be interactive. We'll be able to see everybody, and Adya will be able to interact with you. So those are the two calls, live with Adya. Also the essay. I mean, it's a book club, so you've got to read. It's a requirement, folks. And it'll elevate the conversation. So if you're, not big into reading, that's okay. Maybe there's different kind of thing out there for you. So the essay is called Purpose and Soul, and it's published, well, today, actually. And you'll get it automatically when you register. Also, as a bonus, there's a 2-hour interview. A couple years ago, I went to Adya's house and interviewed him on this very topic. So that is included. There's a couple of bonus calls as well with myself after the book club concludes for integration and really just to keep the discussion alive and really interacting with it, digging. It's a psychoactive essay. I've read it several times, and each time I read it, it's like reading the Tao Te Ching. I'm like, well, I don't remember he said that before. So, I'm prejudiced, but I think it's really quite good. So those are the elements of the book club. There's an early bird special. It's $95 until Sunday, and then it goes up to $125. So that's the nitty gritty. I'll stay at the very end, and we can open it up if there's any questions that just about the logistics of the book club. But let's formally end with Adya inviting you, if he wants to study with him.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jonathan. As I've expressed to you, I was really tickled when you came to me and asked me to do this because it's a real interest of mine. Um, especially in the last few years. And I've just seen it be surprisingly resonant, because the community of people that I speak in would many of them would probably fall into that non-dual category, and I speak a lot about that. And yet I kept seeing that this was a really essential component that people were struggling with, right? That it wasn't really necessarily there in a tangible way, because it's so paradoxical, and well, for a whole lot of reasons. And like I said, I do think we live in a soulfully illiterate culture, and we're showing all the signs and evidence of that. So I think to really like dive into this, to me, it's like personally interesting, but I also think it's a really, it's a kind of like where we're talking, it's a way of loving the world. Like, this is important, this for each of us, right? This connection to live a really meaningful, rich life that's actually contributing something profound. Um, so I look forward to like a deeper exploration of this, and diving in and seeing what people that come to this, what their concerns are, what their questions are, so we can kind of, we start to tailor it into the interest that's out there. It's so vast, it's so big, that I'm just really looking forward to it. And so I hope we have a few friends to join us in
Yeah.
this endeavor together.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting them and studying your essay with you. All right. Well, thank you, Adya. It's just a gift to have you speak on this subject with me and with all of us for the last hour.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's nice to share the space with you. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. You're doing, as I tell you all the time, and I will tell you in public too, you're doing great and very, very important work in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people signed up to listen to us today, because it is important work for anybody to do in the world. I'm glad you're doing it. Yeah.
Thank you, dear teacher.
All right.
All right, folks. So I think Adya will probably, take off and go home, have some dinner, but we'll have a little after party starting in 1 minute. So if you want to stay on the line, please do. And I'll answer any questions, or attempt to answer any questions you have about the book club. It's pretty straightforward, really. It's a book club. We read together and study together, inquire together. In a way that will be hopefully transformative. I mean, to me, that's the point. I enjoy philosophy and cosmology as much as the next person, but I definitely see, as I'm sure most of you or all of you do, a world in need. So how to become more adequate to the task, to the moment that we're in. So, John Binder, is it possible for me to see people now, or is it maybe just well, we'll go with Oswaldo. You're unmuted. Let's see if we can hear you. Oswaldo, you might have to, I can't unmute you, although I'm trying.
Hi.
Oh,
Hear me?
there, now I can hear you. Please, hi.
Thank you for organizing this. Very, very inspiring, very deep. When Adyashanti was speaking and explaining to us all of this, I don't know why it came to my mind, this classification that I keep about people in 3 categories, and this might be very dualist, and I would like to hear your comment, your reflection about this categorization of people as one of these 3 categories. Those who are in the label that I still use is atheist.
Oswaldo, I am sensing that I'm going to love your question. So I think I did an inadequate job of describing what we would do in the next 15 minutes. I was actually, I'd love to get into it with you, which is why I formed the book club. Let's kick the can down the road further into this conversation tonight, and especially into the book club. I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions about the mechanics of the book club itself, just so people were clear. So thank you for going into the deep end of the pool, which is where I like to be. But I want to just take if anyone has a question just about the book club, I want to start with that. So Valerie, Chris, and Chess. Yeah. So let's start with Valerie. Do you have a question about the book club, Valerie?
I do. Hi.
Hi.
This is
Welcome.
I wanted to ask, is it possible for us to acquire that, will that book be available, that essay be available, if the timing doesn't work out for the book club or logistics don't work out for us?
We're not publishing it as at this moment outside of the book club. So it is, it's not available outside. That said, we are recording. So if you can't come at this time in 2 weeks and then in 3 weeks for the 2-hour meetings, it'll be recorded. So anyone who can attend live can rewatch, and anyone who can't attend live can watch. So if you are, really desirous of reading it and then hearing Adya talk about it and interact with people, that's a way to do it.
I'm just curious, how much reading is involved? Like how many pages is...
Oh, that's a great question. No, this is exactly why I opened it up. It's short. It's a 20-page essay. So it's pith. It's not like a 100 or 200-page book. He gets to the point, which is great. So yeah, if you're a slow reader, which many of us are, it's a short piece. It's an essay. I call it a book club because the first two book clubs we had were books proper, thick books of 200 pages. This maybe should be called the essay club, but that sounds kind of silly. So.
Got it, thanks. And one quick question follow-up.
Yeah.
What will the size of the group be if it's going to be interactive with him?
Well, it's kind of impossible for me to know at this point what size the group will be. So I don't know. This could be a very well attended event or not. I can't. I don't. I can tell you the last 2 book clubs, but I don't know that will. The last 2 book clubs are between 100 and 200. This could be more than that. It could be several hundred. So, so that's a good point. If it's very large, would every single person have an opportunity to interact with Adya? If it were very large, probably not. But if it's like the size it was before, then yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, Chris, and then Chess.
There.
Hi, Chris.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Okay, I think actually, just from listening to your last response that you already answered my question, but just to confirm it. So this is the only item in the book club. It's not the first item.
No, yeah. So we're going deep as opposed to wide. So there's a lot of very good Adyashanti books that I really recommend. The focus of this book club series is on soul and purpose. So the title, I don't really generally share it out loud, but I call it the Purpose Geeks Book Club because I'm a purpose geek, which is to say I'm fascinated by the topic of destiny and fate and service and being a demonstration of love and all of that. So I select authors, or in this case, I actually asked the author if he would write something. So yeah, we won't be studying other books. We're going to go very deep into this one essay. And I would say, because I do this myself with books that I really love, I read them several times. In this case, it's a 20-page essay. And so you can probably easily I think the 3rd time is when it really begins to sing, at least for me. But
okay, thank you for clarifying, because I had thought it was Adyashanti was kind of the commentator, but that we were going to read books of various other types, not necessarily just by him.
Nope. This is a neat book club in that the normal book clubs will read a book by someone they may or may not be alive. This is a case where the author is coming to discuss and delve into a book, or in this case, an essay that he just recently, that was published today. So it's I think it's a juicy opportunity.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right. Who did I say next? I believe it was Valerie, then Chess.
No, you did Valerie already.
Oh, I did. All right. I didn't put the hand down. That's the problem when I forget to do that. In that case, Chess and then Shoshi. Chess, are you up there? There you are.
There
Hi.
it is. Okay, hi. Hey, thank you so much for doing this. This has been
welcome.
just a lovely evening. Will there be opportunity, if there are a couple hundred people in the group, will there be the opportunity to submit any questions beforehand through
Yes.
email or anything that Adyashanti might find one of those and go, I definitely want to make sure I get to this?
Yes, very much. We're going to have a Facebook group, which we'll call the Virtual Fire Circle. It'll only be for people. It'll only be made available to people who are taking the book club. And so I'll be on there, daily and looking at the questions. And so I'm going to, pick out. What often happens is many people have a version of the same question. So yes, exactly. That's absolutely key. So the short answer is yes.
Beautiful. I look forward to it. Thank you very much. And the dates are the 21st and then?
And the 28th.
Okay.
Yep. 2 weeks in a row, 6 p.m.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Pacific. You're welcome. All right. So let's see who is next. Shoshi, then Lisa Taylor. Hi, Shoshi.
All right. Hi there, Jonathan. Thank you so much. And so my question is a technical one. While Adyashanti was on, Zoom kept cutting in and out. There was electrical pauses, so I missed so much of what he was saying. And since he's been off the call, the Zoom quality has been stellar.
Okay.
And so my concern is that if I come in, and I'd love to come in and join, I just finished up a 2-month online retreat with him. Every second with him is beneficial.
Yeah. Every
point of contact is beneficial.
Yeah.
But I just want to be assured that I will be able to enjoy quality of call.
Yeah. Yeah. So honestly, I can't ensure it because it's a Zoom and an internet issue. I have had good experience with Zoom. So I did a call with the Buddhist activist Joanna Macy. Maybe it was last week. 1,000 people. That was a huge. This book club will not be that big, I don't think. So, and it went just fine. No one that I know have said that it was a problem. So, I don't know if it was an issue with the internet or Zoom. I mean, things can happen with the internet. So as I teach a lot on Zoom and I've had very good experience, but yeah, I couldn't in good conscience guarantee a perfect listening experience. So, but we'll do our best, and we'll have our people standing by to, correct anything on our end if it's possible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to take a chance because it's worth it.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Glad.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you.
And Jonathan, there was no issues that I saw on the video on my end, so it might have been an issue just with her local internet.
Yeah. So we, that's a possibility that
Mount Shasta. Mount
and,
Shasta is full of mischief. So
yeah, it is. I've climbed that mountain and experienced some strange and amazing things there. But that's for another day.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You're welcome. All right. Let's see. Did we talk to Lisa, then Neela? Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
I had to find the unmute button. Will tonight's session be available? Thank you, because it was wonderful.
Yeah, I'm going to re-listen to it too. It'll be available to everybody who signed up for the preview call for 72 hours. We want anyone who couldn't come to watch it, we want people to be able to watch it. So enjoy. Have a good weekend with it.
And I'm guessing that if it's available for 72 hours, I should take notes.
Yes.
And should not expect to be able to come back to it after that.
Well, we are making it available, in perpetuity for the people who join the book club. But you can watch it as much as you want, completely free of charge, through the weekend.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Let's see, who did I say next? Did I say Neela? Yep, and then Peasley. Neela, can you unmute yourself? Nella, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Hi.
Well, I have a question about the content.
Yeah.
I wonder if in the essay and the book is planned to go into the how-tos rather than just the theory like today.
Right.
It's like, yes, I agree with that. Yes, I've been wanting to connect to my soul for a while. So, I mean, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, very much so. So I'm glad you pointed that out, because I was remiss. The point isn't just to have a juicy philosophical conversation. In fact, that's actually not the point. The point is to discover the means and the ways by which you can listen to soul and really hear clearly what it's saying, whether it's in images, as Adya was talking about. So that's the accent of attention. What we didn't say is that he would lead us in a soul-centered meditation, a meditation that is specifically about not necessarily only waking up to true nature, but waking up to how does true nature want to express itself in this moment as what I would call a demonstration of love, really as a form of activism. So the answer is yes, it's practical. That's both of our hopes, is not that just people learn about stuff about purpose and soul, but that people actually deepen their understanding, their embodiment of their soul level purpose. So yeah.
Okay, so he will be leading us into meditations. It's not just Q&A.
No, it's not just Q&A. There will be Q&A, which is a lovely thing, because it's nice to be able to interact with Adya live. And we will be doing experiential exercises. Or you could call them exercises, you could call them meditations, you could call them soul encounter techniques or pathways. But that is actually one of the main points, is that the reading begins to kind of, I don't know what would the word be, loosen up the synapses to allow the possibility that you, whoever you are, actually has a soul level purpose. And then the question is, if you're open to that possibility, you don't have to believe in it, then how does one do that? It's what I do in my professional life. But I asked Adya to do it, and he said yes. So he will be leading us in guided meditations that have that as their objective.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, maybe just a couple more, and then we'll call it a night. Let's see, where are we? I think I called on someone. Was it Peasley? Yep.
Yes. Hi. This is
Welcome.
Peasley. Wonderful experience. So part of me wants to share this with friends. There's a specific set of friends that has a Sangha that has a meeting set up for the 28th. So I'd like to invite them to join, and maybe we could do it together. Is there going to be a link that we can send out to friends who have not signed up for this previously, but that could listen in the next 72 hours? And
oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll in our follow-up email, if we haven't already, I'll make sure to get to it later. So anyone in the next 72 hours can sign up for the preview call, even though it's already happened, and they will have access. So yes, please, you already have the link, and we'll send it again. It's on the website. It's purposeguides.org. And yeah, please share it, because I thought Adya hit it out of the park, and I would love, regardless as to whether people come to the book club, which of course I hope they do. I would love to just have people have that transmission, that hour-long transmission that he gifted us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Great. Yeah, thanks for helping get the word out. anyone who would do that, I'd be, most appreciative. All right, how about Jayant and Gautam? And I'm sorry if I'm botching your names. You can correct me when you unmute.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I really enjoyed that talk and been following Adya for a long time. And as I understand, is this only 2 sessions or is this going to be more? Just 2?
Yeah, so 2 sessions with Adya, 4 in total. So 2 2-hour-long meetings. The first is on May 28th. Then the second is on May, I'm sorry, the first is on May 21st. The second is on May 28th. And then the following 2 Thursdays, we'll have 2 bonus calls. Adya won't be present, but that essay will be we'll still be feeding and interacting with it. And I'll be leading it, also introducing a little material of my own that I think would be helpful to fill out some of what Adya talked about. So actually it's 4 sessions in all, 2 with Adya, 2 with me.
Because what I see is that this translates our intention into action in many ways, because one can be, as Adya mentioned, you can be divorced from real life in the world of esoteric joy, but then the rest of the world is falling apart. And what are we going to do to raise the level of awareness in the world, and to raise human beings from grasping and grabbing to compassion? And so what I see in this is that this could potentially, I'm just putting this forward, I understand it's 4 sessions, could be an ongoing conversation every 3 months where people come back and share where they're stopped, or just to unleash that energy we all have here, and translate that into something real in the world as well.
Yeah, that you just planted a very fertile seed, I think. So I'm going to stew with it. Yeah, that is really the whole point. I mean, there are people like Adya, and I include myself in this, that we are obviously, passionate about what you could broadly call non-duality, awakening, and passionate about the world, just passionate. And so he sometimes calls it, where non-duality, where the rubber hits the road. And it's that contact point between, enlightenment, awakening, meditation, and service to a world that needs it. He made a really good point. No other community of human beings in any age had to experience meditation or anything really under the, cloud of extinction on a global level. I mean, certainly there are extinction events all over the place. So this is, I think the 2020s are just one of the most extraordinary times, and a lot of it quite just heartbreakingly extraordinary. Just, in the 70s and 80s growing up, I didn't think, I mean, there was nuclear war for sure, but this is equal, if not anyway. I'll hold on to my, so the answers, I agree with you. So thank you for bringing that up. I didn't mean to go on a little tear.
By the way, this is Janaki. I'm just using Giant's phone.
Okay.
His laptop.
Great.
So my name is Janaki. And
Janaki.
So both myself and my husband, we both want to do this. So would we both enroll as 2 separate people? Is that how this would work in the book club?
Yeah.
Done.
Great.
Looking
well, I look
forward
to
to
meeting
it,
you
Jonathan.
and delving into the material with you. All right, maybe just a couple more.
You.
Oh, you're most welcome. Gautam and Dorothy.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
Thank you for all your great work, and appreciate this evening with the community in Adya. Loved all the questions and answers so far. A few questions. Are there going to be any reflections or pre-work or anything that needs to be done week by week?
Yep. So Adya just handed into me the inquiries, the questions. So there's a lot of moving parts. I should have, been a better salesperson and remembered and rehearsed all of the elements. So yes, there are questions that we're going to actually put up in the Facebook page, the virtual fire circle, as I call it.
Right.
And it's really useful. I mean, personally, I have some qualms about Facebook for two reasons. One, it's apparently very addictive to some people, so I hesitate to use it there. And then the company itself I have some issues with it. But that said, the software itself allows people from all over the planet to come and out loud take an inquiry that Adya gives us and to dig into it. One isn't obligated to share, but many or most people do when I teach these things, and it's very rich. And then we have a very juicy conversation, everyone coming to this fire circle at a time that works for them. So yeah, Adya has provided that, and you would find those as a book club member at the virtual fire circle.
Okay, and then this may be my naive understanding, or perhaps the density that I'm living in, but I feel learning the language of your soul and wayfinding your purpose is like multi-layered. Would there be a conduit and an opportunity after those 4 sessions if one wants clarity and a little bit more direction? Because I think it's imagination and rigor that go into this. Is there an opportunity to take the dialogue further?
I hope you do. It should be, I mean, should's a strong word, but I'll own it. I think the question of what do I do with this one wild, precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver put it,
right,
is one of the great inquiries that we should hold on to, marry, and never divorce. So there's a few ways. One is we offer a number of free programs like tonight's with different
mm-hmm.
So that's available. There are also, once a year, we convene a cohort. We call it the Purpose Discovery Community, a Purpose Discovery Program. It begins in the first week of September every year. So that's a place to go very deep. That takes, it's a pretty big commitment, so it's not for everybody. But for people who are very serious about what I would call soul purpose awakening or enlightenment, that's another opportunity. So I'd say visit the website. And of course, there's other places outside of Purpose Guides Institute, but certainly we offer a number of avenues to receive support and to give mutual support to people who want to live their soul level purpose.
Okay, great. Thank you for
You're
your
welcome.
kindness and appreciate it. Have a good evening.
You too. Yeah, good to talk with you.
Likewise.
Did Dorothy? I'm not tracking my thing as well as I could. Dorothy, you're on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can indeed.
Yeah. Okay, these are just simple questions. Can we receive? I tuned in like 10 minutes late, so maybe you explained some stuff at the beginning. I don't know. This is the first time hearing about this. So. Will we receive the essay in paper or just online?
Online, yeah. So people who join the book club get instantly, so you sign up and then you get it's called an autoresponder, and it'll have all this information. We also have it again on our website. It'll have that 2-hour interview I did with Adya a few years ago. You'll have the essay. So, you could have it in your hands as early as tonight, as in 1 minute. Yeah, but we don't mail it out in paper. So we didn't go to a printer and print it. You can, of course, print it, but no, we're not going to a printer for that.
Oh.
At least not yet.
So I could bring it up and print it. I just don't like to read extensively on my computer because it bothers my eyes.
Yeah, me too. It's not good for resources, but if it's a really worthwhile piece, one that I'll especially like go to again and again. Yeah, for 20 pages, I mean, you can do it. I guess 10 pages double-sided. So yeah, I would recommend, and this particular one, because I think it's that good, is print it out and be with it, rather than staring at a screen. But yeah, each to their own.
All right. So, is it expected that we should read the whole thing before the 21st?
Yeah, I mean, you can read just the first half. We're gonna delve more into the first half, but because it's, you know, I think fairly short, 20 pages. You know, you've got 14 days to read 20 pages. So, you know, I like reading. When it comes to Adya's work, I read slowly. Like I'll read a couple of pages because you know, it's pregnant with wisdom. So it's not like I need to rush to the end. It's not a murder mystery. So I would say read the whole thing before the first thing, but you know, trust your own intuition. At least read the first half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does he have, so I've listened to Adya in the past, but not lately. I've been involved in these other Buddhist groups. So does he have something about, what does he describe soul? You know, people have different ideas about what soul means. And I don't really, you know, when I tuned in, I don't know if he described that early on, but I didn't catch the early part. So I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about when you say soul, but does he have something like on YouTube or something already describing that?
Yeah, I don't know about on YouTube right now. I would say, yeah, re-listen to this, which will be available all weekend. Obviously, the new essay that he wrote. I think the thing that we like about the word soul, well, I'll speak for myself, not him, but I like the word soul because it's not one of those words that you can give a definitive definition of. It has an air of mystery. It has a perfume of mystery. At least for me, it does. And so he will again and again come at the word, as he does, like with genius, from different angles. And eventually, from the very inside of the diamond, you can have a kind of like an explosive opening. I can experience soul. I can never completely describe it. I can be soul, but I can never completely know it intellectually. So the answer is yes, he will continue to explore with us what he means by the word purpose and soul and the search for meaning in life. And then also, ultimately, it's about waking up to it and being it and knowing it more than a definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, you're welcome. How about Lynn and Seaplane? That maybe is not your actual name, but that's what we'll call you for today, since that's what's on my screen. Lynn, do you want to unmute yourself?
Oh, thank you.
Hi.
Hi, this has been a wonderful journey. I met you 3 webinars ago, and this just heightened it even more. So my question is, in the Facebook group, if we're posting questions, is there going to be able to be an exchange, comments back and forth about our posted questions, or are they just going to be posted for the purpose of you perusing them and making choices as to what you want to bring together to ask?
Well, so I can't speak for Adi because I never asked him if he'd be willing to go on to Facebook. I doubt it. I mean, I'd love to entice him into doing that. I don't even think he uses Facebook. So
okay, I wasn't referring to him. I was referring to, are we able, those of us who signed up?
Yes, very much so.
We can have a dialogue.
Oh, that's the whole, okay. I'm so glad you asked that. That's the whole purpose, because it's not just about posting, like putting a poster on a bulletin board. This is an online discussion, because it's the whole dialectic. I say something, you say something a little different, and we kind of we dance until we find the dance. We dance ourselves and walk ourselves into truth. So yes, very much. I encourage, that's highly encouraged. I put some rules about it because sometimes Facebook just gets, I don't know, a little weird. Kindness, we can disagree, but with respect and kindness, and love. But absolutely, we want to have a rigorous, deep co-inquiry, co-exploration of what we're reading in Adyashanti's essay.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jonathan, I love the way you language things into being.
Oh, thank you.
I really do. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Seaplane, 17.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Welcome.
Oh, hi, this is Margaret. I
Hi,
don't see
Margaret.
so I have no way to change my name. I'm
No
sorry.
worries.
I am new to this. I have never heard of Adyashanti until tonight. I really found his talk amazing. But I'm just concerned whether this essay is something that's too deep. I looked and saw that he's written a half a dozen books, and is this something where I should read a half a dozen books before I do something like this?
No, no. That's such a great question. There are people who are readers. I'm one of them, and I love it. But the truth is, and I really feel this to the bottom of my toes, awakening is not an intellectual pursuit. Erudition ultimately doesn't count for really anything. If you want to understand things intellectually, by all means read. But no, in some ways, not all, but in some ways, you actually benefit from not coming with a whole bunch of baggage and presumed understanding of all the kind of spiritual things that Adya is talking about. So please don't feel shy or embarrassed if you are a beginner when it comes to, the book learning part. It's just not what it's about. It's like I don't know. It's like reading books about love and marriage. I mean, you could read them all and be a not a very good spouse, or you could never read any of them and be an excellent one. I think the second is the better choice.
And proportionately, is it going to be more conversation or more experiential meditation kind of?
Both. Yeah. I mean, partly Adya kind of determines that in the moment. So I can't and wouldn't try to control him, but that's not true. I will try to. So that's not true. I want him to do both. I think it's important, and I will. So I take that back. I really want him to do the experiential pieces. I want people to have the opportunity to have a soul encounter, an awakening to some element of their purpose. But I also want them to have the ability to speak with a person that I regard to be a spiritual master and ask questions about what's getting in the way, or what's difficult, or, oh, I got something and I don't know how to understand it. It's nice to have guidance from someone who's as wise as he is. So yeah, I don't know if if it'd be 45%, 55%, but you'll get a pretty big scoop of each.
And my last question, I'm sorry for taking up so much time.
Yeah.
I live on the East Coast, and so this is really 9 to 11 at night, which is way past my bedtime. Will it be as valuable to listen to a tape of it rather than being able to ask questions or, be there while it's live?
Yeah. It's different for different people. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I think there are people for whom they say being live has some kind of extra dimensionality to it. I listen to YouTube. Watch. I watch YouTube. I watch Adya, and I find it to be as transmissive as being. I've done over 10 retreats with him. Just as transmissive as being there. Now, not everybody would say that, and that's fine. Everyone has a different experience. If I'm open and truly porous, open to what's being said, time and space, in my experience, doesn't really count for much. So I have found recordings. I take a bunch of these, teleseminars and things. I rarely show up live and get a lot out of it. So that's just me. And you can also start off, you can maybe do the first 30 minutes, 9 p.m. to 9:30. And then you might find that you are kind of beginning to wave a ride of a second wind and energy. And if you're not, and you're getting sleepy and tired, rest, take care of yourself. And then you have the recording. And create a sacred space. Don't just do it while exercising or going on, is like really set a time and say, I'm going to be in relationship to this teacher. So that's my 2 cents.
I'll have to think about that, because the house next door to me is under construction and they start promptly at 7 a.m. with very loud noise. So you know, I'm really trying to pace my sleeping, but I will think about that part of it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you. Sherry, and then Lisa, and then Loretta. Sherry, do you want to unmute yourself? If you're speaking, Sherry, I can't hear you. Okay, well, we're gonna, sorry, Sherry, for some reason we can't hear you. So Loretta, you're on. Loretta?
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Great.
I couldn't figure out how to unmute. I was wondering, I know you're going to make the recording that you and Adyashanti did together.
Yeah.
Are you recording this last session, that the session you did after Adya left?
You mean this right here that we're doing now? Yeah, it's all one recording and it'll all be available. So you could.
What you have said this past 45 minutes will also be part of that recording.
Yep.
Oh, because there was so much information in this post session.
Yeah, more than I realized. I thought there'd be just
so valuable.
Oh, I'm glad. That's great. Yeah. So the whole thing will be made. We won't.
What I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, it will. You'll get an unedited. There's nothing we need to edit out. At least I don't think so. So we'll just make it available very soon after we stop. So thanks, Loretta.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
How do I unmute now? How do
I think I can do it for you, Loretta. You are muted. Yep, you're good. Yeah, and we'll teach people how to use the interface because that's helpful when the time comes. And then I lost who I was going to next. I believe it was Lynn and then Jenny. Hi, Lynn.
I had put my hand down. I got confused on how that works.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, but while you have me for a second for your tech, I'm on hotspot and I've had no problem with this transmission tonight.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean it's good because we always have a little concern, you know, using technology. We never know. So thanks for the affirmation.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thank you.
Dorothy, then Barry. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, I spoke to you previously. I'm not sure why I get in there twice.
Oh, maybe we didn't, either you or I or both of us didn't put your hand down. So I got to get better at doing that.
I see that.
That's what happens. Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll wrap up. Maybe we'll do two more and then we should, you know, call it a day. How about Jenny and then Beth, and we'll say goodnight for tonight.
Jonathan.
Hi.
Thank you. This is my second webinar with you, and so I'm very new. I'm someone who had, would say, spiritual experience where I feel like I was already given the message of what my purpose is and what my essence is.
Excellent.
And so my question is, I believe you already figured those out for yourself too. Is what are the benefits of continuing like similar programs, whether it's the Purpose Discovery Program or this book club, if you already know your path?
Yeah, yeah. So I think of it as this way. So to me, purpose discovery isn't a like it doesn't have a finish line. So I do experience myself as someone who's woken up to my purpose. That said, I keep dialoguing with my teachers, Adya being one of them, about deepening the experience. So it's not like, well, I have no idea what my purpose is, and my journey is to have my first glimpse of that. There's a whole sort of post-awakening practice you could call purpose awakening embodiment. And so, you know, you have to ask your own soul, would it be helpful? Would it be purposeful for you to take the course? So there will be people on the book at the book club, I'm guessing, that will be in both categories, right? People for whom they don't really have a very clear notion of what their purpose, their soul purpose is. And there are other people who are like partially or close to fully awakened in it. But then there's the whole question of living it, because ego is still, around to a degree, and it has its fears and its concerns and its reservations, understandably. And so working with that can be very helpful. So I'd say theoretically, it could be very helpful to you, but you'd really need to ask soul. I find it just really helpful to have a guide, to have teachers in these more advanced or subsequent steps beyond the initial awakening.
That makes sense to me. I think I would just sit with it's usually, I think intuitively, I would just know whether to go for something.
Yeah.
And thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Adya always has this little thing. He just says, trust yourself. And I love that. So, that would be my message to you. If soul says yes, go for it. If it says no, then take a pass.
In any case, thank you so much for the work that you do.
Oh, you're most welcome. Most welcome. All right, last one. I think I said Barry. Get the last word, Barry. Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Oh, great. Well, thanks so much for putting this on. I know it's a lot of work, and really appreciate it. You had kind of indicated earlier in the talk that this was maybe part of a series of book clubs, and you have done other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk maybe a little bit about what that whole series is, and are the other book clubs, the other books available? Are they worth reading as part of the series? That kind of thing.
Yeah. They're very distinct. They're very different. So I started the book club 3 years ago. So this will be the third. The first one was with the Buddhist activist and scholar Joanna Macy. We read a book called Active Hope. It's totally apples and oranges from what you get with Adyashanti, but well worth the read. And one of these days, hopefully soon, I should get on with it, which is to make the recordings available. I will sell them on my website. I haven't gotten to that yet, frankly. So even when a thing is passed, we could, presumably make it available. The second was with the depth psychologist, archetypal psychologist, Thomas More, disciple of Hillman, who is a disciple of Jung. He just published a book called Ageless Soul, which was around soul and purpose, for the gray hairs, like me, who are getting older. And that was a good book too. But Adyashanti's essay is again, apples and oranges. So there's no, and we do these book clubs just once a year. So there's no effort for me. I don't make any effort to connect what we read 2 years ago and 1 year ago with now. We spend our whole time really delving into this one thing. So again, we go really deep as opposed to going wide. But that isn't to say if you like what you get from Adya, you might go, oh, I want to go deeper with these book clubs. And then next year there'll be, presumably, hopefully, another author, and then the year after. But that's just in the planning stages at this point.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, thank you, all you hardy folks who stayed for an extra 50 minutes to hear some of the ins and outs of the book club. So I will just end with, I hope some of you will take up the invitation to study with Adya his essay, Purpose and Soul and the Search for Meaning, and which happens May 21st, May 28th, 2 hours interactive with him, experiential, reading his essay and having the virtual fire circle where we can discuss together online, this, what I regard to be as an essential topic at a time that is, wow, what would be the word? Poignant would miss it. Super poignant squared. It's urgent. So I think it's a timely topic, for those of us who are spiritually oriented people, but who care desperately about the world and our children and our friends' children and our grandchildren. There are some signs that things are going to be pretty challenging pretty soon. They're difficult enough with COVID, but they may be quite a bit more difficult with climate change. So, yeah, I hope to see you there. All the information's on the website. You can sign up in the next 3 days and get the early bird rate. It's $95. And thereafter, it'll be $125 for 2 classes with Adya, 2 with me, the essay, the virtual fire circle, and the interview. So thank you for your attention. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good night.